first of all, I want to let you know how very moved we are with the volume of people that are here tonight. This is a blessing beyond any of our expectations. So if you will, find a seat. If there's not a seat at the table, if you can just pull a chair in the back, your input is critically important to us. I am Sharon Harrop, and I have the honor of serving as President and CEO of STEPS Incorporated. STEPS, Virginia Supportive Housing, and the Moton Museum are asking for your input on an exciting new housing initiative on land previously attributed to Israel Hill. STEPS is purchasing approximately 48 acres of land on Lane Street, and Virginia Supportive Housing will build supportive housing for people who have previously been unhoused or homeless. Many believe that our region does not have a homeless issue. However, just to share a few stats with you guys, starting July 1st of 2023, for the first 3 quarters, which is a 9-month period, STEP served 75 households and 173 individuals. That number also includes individuals who are fleeing domestic violence and looking for safe shelter. So our community does have a homeless issue. We want community input on how we can honor the history of Israel Hill and the people there, commonly known as Israelites. Honoring them can take all sorts of different forms. It could be naming roads, it could be a historical walking trail, it could be monuments, it could be anything that you can imagine. And we are committed and dedicated to ensuring that the history of Israel Hill is not lost with the initiative that we're bringing forward. We also want community input on not only the naming of how to honor the former enslaved individuals that resided at Israel Hill, but we also want your input. Once Virginia Supportive Housing constructs their apartment buildings, which will be targeted for people that were unhoused or currently homeless, what do we do with the rest of that acreage? We are hoping to develop affordable houses for working families, but what else do we need in this community? Do we need senior housing? Do we need smaller rental homes? So please let your input be heard tonight. I'm going to take just a minute and introduce the speakers that will be coming up to share the information that we have gathered thus far. And then we will break into small groups to really get your input on a number of questions. Will you please stand when your name is called? Sean Rozier serves as the STEPS VP of Housing. So it's under Sean's leadership that all of this work is being done. Our Moton partners, Kanan Townsend. Kanan, where are you? Well, I know Kanan is, okay, he's getting more chairs probably. Kanan Townsend is here. Hey, Kanan. Our Virginia Supportive Housing partner, Allison, and I got permission not to try to butcher her last name, so she will share that with her when she's talking with you guys. Dean Hawkins, who is a landscape architect and the lead development planner on our project, and Dean had his work cut out for him when he joined our project, I must say.
It's pretty fast.
Okay. Also in attendance tonight are valued partners at the state level. Dr. Darrell Wilburn, Dr. Wilburn, is the Balance of State Continuum of Care Program Manager with the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development. And it's the state funds that we get through them that act as a current cornerstone for our Virginia Homeless Solutions Program. So thank you for investing funds in our region. And we also have Kristen Dahlman. Kristen is a member of the Virginia Community Action Partnership Association. Kristen is really an advocate for community action agencies like STEP statewide, so thank you for coming in and participating. And then for those of you that serve and volunteer on our Homeless Housing Task Force, Would you please stand and be recognized? These individuals give tireless hours to help us do point-in-time count, which is usually the coldest night in January, or sometimes rainy and coldest night in January. They also volunteer to let the community voices be heard. And we believe so strongly at STEPS that it's our responsibility to ensure that whatever services we put on the street, whether it's Head Start, or whether it's some of our workforce development programs, or our soon-to-be open domestic violence shelter, that we're listening to our community. This is not something that we're doing in a vacuum. So any of the individuals that stood as members of the Homeless Housing Task Force, be sure to grab them and ask them questions if you don't get your questions answered tonight. It is now my honor to pass the microphone over to Kanan, who is going to give us a history of Israel Hill.
I'm going to set my timer because I'm giving a very brief history of Israel Hill, and I want to make sure I don't go on too long and take up too much of our time here this evening. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kenny Townsend. I serve as Executive Director here at the Moton Museum. Lifelong native of Prince Edward County. I've worked here, it'll be about 8 years in August, but I will confess this is not the normal history that I talk about as a part of the museum here between 51 and 1964, but I do find that this history is crucial to us in one very important way, and that is when people ask, like, why does this history take place in Prince Edward County? Why Barbara Johns? Why Martha Forrester? Why Reverend L. Francis Griffin? To answer that question accurately from my perspective, you've got to go all the way back to Israel Hill and those Israelites in that community, that free African American community that existed going way back to 1811. So we're going to give you all a very, very brief kind of overview of some of this history, starting with kind of my reference, and that is Israel in Mathematics, which is a book that was written by Dr. Melvin Patrick Ely. You all will be seeing that. I see a copy of that book in that box over there. We used to sell that book in our bookstore, and I would encourage you, it is a dense text. But if you get to it, that is really the best source, I think, to really learn about that Israel Hill community. But what Dr. Ely got most of that information from are from county courthouse records, which are primarily housed in Library, Virginia, over in Richmond. So that's where most of this research comes from. But I do want to give you all at least a little bit of an outline as to why this was an important community and the connections that it has to kind of contemporary times. So formerly the Bazaar Plantation, Richard Randolph Jr. writes a will in 1795. Unfortunately, he would pass away 1 year later, 1796. He was, at the time, the owner of that land. He had inherited from his father. And Richard Randolph Jr. in his will had written into that upon his death, all of his enslaved persons would be free, at the time over 100. And the heads of households of those families, which was at the time would have been formerly enslaved persons, would be deeded 25 to 40 acres of land each per head of household. Okay, so that was in 1796. Now there are a lot of things going against that will being enacted at that point in time. There are plenty of cases where, maybe not plenty, but there are several cases where former enslavers trying to free their enslaved persons upon their death, and those wills are contested, right, quite a bit, because slavery at the time, you think about slaves and enslaved persons, they're treated as property, right? So often enslaved persons had to be auctioned off post people's death to pay off the debts. Richard Randolph Jr. was very much no exception. So his widow, Judith Randolph, had to manage after his untimely passing, because he was only 26 or so years old, he was very young. This was not expected. But now she's got to navigate the wishes of her widowed husband, but also paying off the debt in the life that he did live as well. And so to Judith, she did emancipate a few folks early on, but could not necessarily manage the mass emancipation of Israelites until the year 1811, and that's the year that we kind of start. And although some of it did happen a bit before then, 1811 is usually the traditional starting point of Israel Hill in that community. They called it Israel Hill because Israel, they treated that as their promised land, right? Because that's something not a lot of people, of course, would have experienced, so it does have that biblical connection there. So at the time of emancipation, you end up with approximately, in Prince Edward County, about 5,000 white individuals, or just before emancipation, about 7,000 or so enslaved individuals, 300 already free African American individuals, and at the time of kind of the emancipation of those Israelites, rather, you had about 90 of them total who were the original kind of Israelites to that land at that point in time. And so the thing is about the fact that these folks owned land, it meant that they could do occupations that maybe other free African Americans could not have done during that time period. If you were free and you did not own land at that point in time, often you were living off the land. You were doing the best you could in the situations that you had. And often these free African Americans in Virginia would live in the more rural parts of Virginia, Prince Edward County, of course, being no exception to that. But our community here, those Israelites, 90 folks, of course, had that 400 acres that was divided up amongst them. And so as you have land, you have things to protect that land, or reasons to protect that land. And you can take on occupations that other people, again, might not be doing during that time period as well. As business, as entrepreneurship began to grow within the Israel community, they began to do business with people. Often, Israelites would do business with white people. Often. And so what that would eventually lead to is peaceful coexistence. Sounds way too strong for what I'm actually describing, but it was some level of mutual understanding. I think back then they realized something that's very important, to which we talk about here at the museum today. At the end of the day, there's one color that matters for most people, and that color was green. If you are about the business, we can find ways to get past our individual skin differences, right? Because we still have more in common than people who might have the same skin color as me, but might be a horrible human, or might be a degenerate, or might be whatever they would have classified people as back then during that time period. So you did have a pretty common experience of black and white individuals working together, doing business together, right? And that truly is a proof of concept for one of the things that we talk about here at the museum, and that is when we talk about Barbara Johns, right? When Barbara Johns gets moved away, after the threats on her life, it was actually one of her white neighbors in Darlington Heights, Virginia, that warned them and convinced them to move her away. In the more rural parts of the county, in Prince Edward, in Green Bay, and Rice, and Maharon, and Prospect, it wasn't uncommon at all to have black and white folks living next to each other, to do business together, to farm next to each other. You loan me your plow, I'll give you half my crop. Situations like that happen all the time, and I find that kind of goes directly in the way back to this Israel Hill community, proving that something like that could be successful in a way. So you have those groups of people, also faith communities. And so First Baptist Church here in Farmville was actually started as it was an integrated church at first. Now, the pews were segregated, of course, and then the leadership was all white, but you did have an example of some kind of desegregated society working in some form or fashion. And those people who went to that church very much bonded in a lot of ways because they realized that they had more in common with the people inside that church than what they would call the hooligans who would go and regularly harass those churchgoers, black and white, after church on Sundays, right? And so they realized something very important there, which again, peaceful coexistence does not do it justice, it's not accurate, but some level of mutual understanding. And so as these Israelites are doing this work, they are entrepreneurs, they are landowners, they're business owners. You know, the historical marker going out to down 3rd Street, which is right between 3rd Street and I forget the name of the other street, but you'll see it on that island in between 3rd. If you're going out to Waldy's or whatnot, that'll list a lot of the occupations. Boatman was a very popular occupation for these Israelites, which is very uncommon for that to be an African American person. Because to be a boatman, somebody had to trust you enough to let you travel with $1,000 worth of goods and wares, right? And then to trust you not to steal it and to make sure that it got to its spot effectively, efficiently, and safely. And so the fact that at one point in time, upwards of about 40% of those bateau boats, which they would use to travel this cargo, were operated by black individuals. It really should be a testament to how highly revered and respected these individuals were during their time period. So as we all know with business agreements, sometimes they don't go the way in which you would like or hope or expect for them to go. So what do? What is your cause to move forward and receive some type of retribution for that? Israelites regularly use the court system here in Prince Edward County, which I found to be one of the most fascinating parts of this whole story. Of course, for most of the time, 1911 until post-Civil War era, African Americans could not testify in any type of criminal trial. They just were not allowed. But black people could testify in civil trials. So it was not uncommon for many of these members of this Israelite community to, let's say, I do a job for you, you're a white man, I'm a black man, and you don't pay me. Right? Instead of me trying to confront you or do anything like that, I'll take you to court. And there's every reason that folks should have in this room to believe that in the 1800s, they weren't successful. But I'm telling you, more often than not, they were successful, which is absolutely profound. And I find it to be another direct connection to the story, and the way that I word it, it's a proof of concept for justice, right? This is the same court system that addressed Scott v. Sanford, some of these folks that can never be citizens, and they're using the Prince Edward County court system to go and get retribution for actions taken against them. There were some assault cases and such as well that these Israelites would go to court and win. And those were a big premise behind what the book that Dr. Ely put together based on his courthouse records, right? So these are phenomenal people, and that created a presence of an African-American middle class that would lead to the desire of schools here, and I find a bit earlier than other communities, even the surrounding counties, right? I've tracked back 1866, kind of freedmen schools. We had one in Prince Edward County, or we had a couple in Prince Edward County that had about, around 1866, about 150 students, right after the Civil War ends. That is not something that's very common. That's not something that happened in a lot of other places. And that's due to the advocacy and the standing and the status of those Israelites within this Prince Edward County community. Now, I'm coming up on my time, but I did say this was going to be a brief snippet. But W.B. Du Bois did a study here in Prince Edward County in 1898 called the Study of the Farmville Negro. And that study had several kind of passages and pieces of text lifted and used in this more famous Philadelphia study, which is what became much more prominently known for. And I just want to read one of the quotes because I think it really does a great job of kind of surmising this community and showing what the Israelites were truly about and give a good idea to their attitude and their temperament. So finally, it remains to be noted that the whole group life of Farmville Negroes is pervaded by a peculiar hopefulness on the part of the people themselves. No one of them doubts in the least but that one day black people will have all the rights they are now striving for, and that the Negro will be recognized among the earth's greatest peoples. Perhaps this simple faith is of all products of emancipation, one of the greatest of social and economic value. Okay? So an outsider, granted one with a similar skin complexion to many folks here, from Philadelphia, who is probably sharp dressing and fast talking, comes and is able to ascertain this type of information by looking at these people, many of which were descendants of that Israelite community. Right? I think this tells us almost everything we need to know about that community. They were not passive players. They were active, they were engaged, they were community members, and they were the reason that really paved the way and set the scene for what would happen here in the 1940s and 1950s, and certainly throughout the 60s. Going back to that point I said earlier, the proof of concept for justice in Prince Edward County, I find, comes from Israel and those Israelites. So that's my brief little blurb. If you want to know more, I will share some resources with the folks at staff. Will be posted on that landing page. But also, I would encourage you to read the book, Israel and Appomattox. It's long, it's thick, but I will say about that much of its resources. So it's really about that long. So I think I can do it. We're working on audio book too. So thank you so much.
I did want to take a minute to thank someone that came tonight that I didn't realize she was coming, but my colleague at DHCD, Desiree Williams. Sorry to put you on the spot. Stand up real quick. All right, she is our housing specialist, and I just thank you, Desiree, for everything you do to help me, to teach me, and guide us through all that we do at Steps. So my task here in just a brief 5 minutes is to try and get us, get you a little overview of the project, what we're doing, what we're supposed to do, how this all got started. I wanted to first though highlight that some of Steps history, because I think it's important for this community to know that Steps has been here for a pretty long time, and we've done a lot of services across this community and in the counties beyond. And so we are not a fly-by-night group, and so you'll see when we were founded, some of the programs that we've been involved in over the years. As you can see, there's quite a few years involved in each of those. So we have a rich history in this community. As it comes to homeless services, just give you a little snapshot of what we do already. We are the lead agency for the Heartland Local Planning Group. That is a group of multiple agencies and representatives that oversee the policies and the programs, the housing programs that we administer for this region. And you see the counties there that we serve at the bottom. We do a 24/7 homeless housing line where we do coordinated entry, assess needs. We get calls all hours of the night throughout the year of individuals who are homeless and need our help. Just kind of get a sense of the demand. Last fiscal year, in fiscal year 23, I meant to put that all case managed housing services. We served 108 households, 278 individuals. And so of that number, you see how many we sheltered in emergency shelters. That was through the Virginia Homeless Solutions Program. And then we also get a grant through our partners at Centra Health. In the last grant reporting period, fiscal year 22, you see what we did with their funds. So as Sharon mentioned in her opening, we do have an issue with homelessness in our region. We do need services that will help them. So we did want to mention that we have additional programs and steps. So you see some of those that we do: workforce development, early childhood education. Many of you have supported us with our domestic violence, sexual assault service establishment. In the fact that Madeleine's house is going to reopen in the fall at some point, Lord willing, once the federal government pushes the button. So there's a listing of our services in the back if you want to find out more information. We are a whole family agency, so we have a whole family department that kind of helps us to reach out across the enterprise to help with multi-generational case management services and other support services. So just to give you a snapshot of the need, the different situations, so people often ask, like, what the homeless in this community, who are they? So just know that you've got, for us in this area, a number of children. You have parents, families, elderly, disabled, single individuals. They come from all walks and stations of life. All right, this is where, when we get the call, they're in sheds, cars, tents. It could be just gotten kicked out of a family or friend's house, or they might have run out of funds at a hotel and they were scraping by. 55% are females. As you see, about half of the households we serve through the Virginia Homeless Solutions Program are children. So they have children in them. And of course, the implications educationally for these youth are huge. To bounce around like this. So people often ask, why are people homeless? So there's a multitude of reasons. They don't all show up in every household. But you see, kind of the list between job loss, disability, illness, domestic violence, mental health, substance abuse, family conflict, and of course the high rental costs that are everywhere, not just in our region. I will say, the important point to make, we do not have we have a very small number of chronically homeless individuals. So what that means is, chronically homeless is a formal definition that the federal government has around multiple times that you are homeless within a certain period of time. And basically it's the same, the individual remains homeless and then also has some serious health issues and other things that are creating that. So what we determined is that, we need a better homeless solution. So we're sheltering in motels, but we can't do that even without having to refer to shelters outside the region due to limited funding. And so this is what supportive housing can do, and I'm not going to steal Alice's thunder, but this is what we were hoping to see come to this region. We had, as Sharon mentioned, a homeless housing task force made up of multiple community organizations, nonprofits, churches, and advocates. They started work nearly 4 years ago. In great news, we raised over $825,000 towards the cost of this project. And then we were blessed to run into Virginia Supportive Housing. We have an MOU with them. And just see some of the requirements that we really needed to have in terms of town water and sewer and public transportation. So I'm in my presentation by just reaching out to you, that we would have a new dawn in this community. I mean, this is a community challenge. And we need to rise to the occasion while we're remembering the history and achievements of those who came before us on Israel Hill. This is a generous community that can come together to address this serious challenge. We have multiple human helping agencies that are around the table that will come provide service. So the challenge is, withholding our best efforts or doing nothing will not make the challenge disappear. I think that's an important point we need to remember. It's going to take a community-wide effort, and STEPS is here. We stand ready to take an active role in that effort. So we would appreciate your being here and providing the input that we're going to need to help us and help this community do that. So I will turn it over now to Allison from Virginia Supportive Housing, and she will tell you about their agency and what they do.
Thank you. I have to give out handouts.
Okay. I can have.
Just need to go on the side. If we don't have enough, we'll make sure we bring some more. Good evening, I'm Allison Moganovich. I'm the Executive Director of Virginia Supportive Housing, and I get to do meetings like this here and in other parts of the state, and this is a great crowd to care about homelessness and to talk about supportive housing. So it's really fantastic to see so many people interested. Virginia Supportive Housing has for 36 years been helping people who have experienced homelessness with one type of program that's called supportive housing. So 36 years ago, it was considered very innovative and even experimental. You combine affordable housing with supportive services and make it very low barrier, which means you don't say to folks you have to have a job before you move in, or you have to be clean before you move in. No, we're going to deal with your basic needs first. We're going to take away the fear of where you're going to sleep tonight and what are you going to eat. We're going to deal with those basic needs first, and then we're going to surround you with services to help you meet whatever goals you have. And this supportive housing model, 36 years ago, experimental, but today it's evidence-based. It's what everyone says ends homelessness in communities. And so we started in Richmond, and we've now expanded to 8 different communities in Virginia, and that was all based on partnerships like with STEPS. And so we were pretty happy in Richmond doing our thing, and communities started to come to us about 12 years ago and say, well, we don't have Virginia Supportive Housing in Portsmouth or in Charlottesville. Would you come and use your expertise here? And so we don't come into communities and say, I'd really like to build in Farmville. I do love your town. It reminds me of where I grew up. But it really takes a group like STEPS, who has a lot of local credibility and is providing local services, and they've assessed sort of the situation and said, we need a supportive housing partner. And that's what we're really good at. It's a very specific thing. We know how to build them and then how to operate them. And so we have about 12 of these communities from Charlottesville all the way to Virginia Beach. That sort of is on the 64 corridor. And so we have a real estate team that helps put the project together. We anticipate this project will cost about $24 million million. And $1 million already is fantastic locally, because what we want to do is we want to go out there and get as much federal and state money as we can and bring that here to invest in a new project. And that's what our team knows how to do. And then building it is actually, and raising that capital stack is actually the easy part. It's the long-term operating and providing the services that is actually why supportive housing is so successful. And our model has over a 95% success rate of people not returning to homelessness. And that is the heart of Virginia supportive housing, of the fine folks who come to work for us. And so we have 155 staff members, 60 of those are social workers, right? And they're working in the buildings every day to help folks, whether it's activities of daily living, whether it's getting the GED, whether it's getting on disability, whatever that looks like. And it's very customized to the person. Then we also have property management staff who are operating these apartment buildings just like anywhere else you would live. So apartments have a full kitchen and bathroom. This isn't a shelter. People have their own kitchen. They're independent living. They're cooking for themselves. It's not like a dorm or shared bunk beds. That's what people want. They want the dignity of their own apartment. They have a lease. They pay rent. It's just like everybody else. And so and what's kind of unique is that we're doing all of these functions under the Virginia Supportive Housing umbrella, under the mission to end homelessness. And that means that everyone is acting in cooperation, right? The services is working with the people who run the buildings, and the people who are building the buildings. And to have that blended with such a strong partner as steps is really spectacular opportunity. It's very rare, it's very rare for all those stars to align. And we are seeing communities across Virginia come to us to say, we coming out of COVID, we housed all of these people with federal COVID money in hotels, and what do we do? That money is gone, and we don't have the shelter space for them. And frankly, we're focused on communities like this one, where folks, you've got it together. You've got a group of folks, you've got a site, and we hope to help mobilize that and bring in the funding and the expertise of how to put these projects together so that we can actually realize them. So you can see in that brochure or on our website sort of all of our demographics and our outcomes. You know, we're measuring what happens to folks once they live with us, our average length of stay. Before COVID, it was about 4.5 years. That's the average that people stay with us. Now we're up to about 6.5 years, and that's all a result of the rental market because there's not affordable housing for people to move into. That's pretty much what folks are dealing with. But in every community we're working with, we're trying to provide the number of supportive housing units that will be enough to provide a home to everyone who is unhoused. So we have a specific plan for Richmond, for Portsmouth. And what's really fantastic is this one building can provide enough supportive housing for your community. And that's such an unusual opportunity for you to have. So one other thing, we are in this for the long haul. This is not something that we put together, earn a fee, and walk out from. We have built and owned everything we've ever built over the last 36 years. You know, we are structuring these to fund themselves. You know, once it's opened, we know how it's going to operate for the next 15 years. We find that after 10, 15 years, the building needs more love. We'll go back and reinvest in renovating it. And so we have a really long-term vision. And in every community that we worked in Southampton Roads and Charlottesville, we have basically folks who want more. We are good neighbors. Folks say, you know, we need another building to focus on seniors. We need another building to focus on vets. And I'm sure that if anyone was interested in talking with our neighbors or some of our partners in other communities, they would let you know that we stand by our word and that we hope that we'll earn your trust. So I'm happy to stick around and
5 copies per table. If we need more, let me know, and I'll print some more. I really did not expect to have this many people here tonight, so thank you for coming out. I'm Dean Hawkins, I'm a landscape architect, and Steps has graciously contacted me to be a part of this work. And when Sean told me that we would have a meeting tonight, he said, now, I want you to focus on the design of the site. I don't want you to talk about history, because there's someone else here who's going to talk about history. And then, don't talk about the housing or the program, because there's somebody else here to talk about that. So I'm left with this. But, as Yogi Berra said, it's like deja vu all over again. And here we are in a place that has this history and the way things happened in Israel Hill. And here we are about to really replicate that process of people finding a home. So, tonight we have a chance to talk about these exhibits. Closer? Oh, yeah. We have this chance to talk about this project, and I see all these whiteboards or tablets around, which will allow you to, after we talk a little bit, to write down your thoughts. And that's important because even though I have assumed some things and shown some things, we're looking for that idea that none of us have thought about. And when I look at all these display boards around for people to comment on, I kind of get the shivers, because when I was a freshman at Tech in architecture school, one of the first classes I had was with a German, Austrian professor. He didn't speak like you and me. And he would say, I want you to show me a development that you would like to do. And I said, what is a development? And he said, you know, a thing you create. I said, oh, you mean a development? Yeah, that's it. So he said, well, the first thing we're going to do is to create a poster. And I forget what the project was about, but it was just a poster like that board. That's why I'm getting the quakes here. And he said, design this poster and come back here tonight at 8 o'clock at school, and we're going to talk about it. And I thought, I've never been at school at 8 o'clock at night except for a basketball game or a football game. Well, what's that about? So anyway, I showed up, and when we got there, he said, now, everybody bring your posters? He said, yes. I said, yes. And I said, everybody line up. So here we are, all up in front like this. And he said, hold up your posters. So he watched me, watched us. As we went across the line, he looked at everybody's work. And he said, now hold them up really high so I can see them. So everybody's like this. He says, now hold very tight with your left hand and pull down with your right hand. And all of a sudden you heard all this rip, rip, rip. People ripping their work in half. So the point of the story is, I guess, is that nothing I do is in stone. It's something to give you a chance to shoot at, but just don't kill the messenger, okay? But that's something that was kind of tough to get used to, but once you did, you understood the process of design, of coming up with ideas, validating them, changing your mind a lot of times. So, with that, let's start with these display boards. I think I have 10. I hope I have 10 here. And these are as per your narratives, as well as the drawings. And the first one is my cover sheet. It says the residences at Israel Hill. Now, I alone am the person who decided to call this thing that. Because generally, that's what it is. All types of different residences. But if you want to change the name, that's fine with me, I'll rip that up. And that's always really an homage to Israel Hill. It was an easy, no-brainer to come up with this. The second one is an aerial photograph of the site. It's kind of hard to read, to see. This is 3rd Street, this is Lane Street, and this is the High Bridge Trail that actually splits our property into 2 pieces. So this 4 or 5 acre piece on this side of the trail is really inaccessible and landlocked to us, and I'm not showing anything on that property. But the site is adjacent to Davis Pontiac GMC truck now. I used to have a Pontiac, but I took it away. And this is an old construction barn that's still on the site for your reference. And then Lane Street with some homes along here. Average trail splits right through it. That's going to come into play, I think, a little bit in our design if the state of Virginia will allow it for use. The third one, and this is where I step on some historical codes I know, but I couldn't stand it because the book, Israel on the Appomattox, you need to get a copy of that. I have it here. I couldn't put it down. There's so much history in it, and it shows us so much. But in that book, they show the historical placard that's on the street about the settlement. It shows an overlay of today's road network as you see it. 460 is here, 3rd Street. And this dotted line is what they think in 1811 were the boundaries of Israel Hill. Our site is right in here, right in this corner. So I had to step on historical toes because it's so much a part of where we're going with this. And this also shows a map from the book about the bequest of the land to the individual families that first occupied the site. So that's interesting to see. This is a picture of the area in 1903. This is what is really the creek. They called it a river at the time that wraps around the site. I think maybe this was the old railroad track through there. Our site is actually up into here, a little bit off of the photo. But again, I had to show it because it's interesting to know where you came from, to know where you're going. And Dr. Ely, the professor of William and Mary, wrote the book that we've been referencing. And this is an excerpt from chapter 3 of his book. If you don't have it, this is probably the most important part of his book that talks about the history of the creation of Israel Hill, from the plantation to the owners. So Dr. Ely is in Bulgaria tonight. He met with us on Zoom recently, and I think he wanted to be here, but he said he was going to be in Bulgaria, and I said, well, you got to be somewhere. You may as well be there. So he chose Bulgaria over Farmville. I believe that. So he's doing research, I'm sure, for his next book. Getting on to the last types of drawings, and this is really more focused on the design itself of the site that we propose. This is just some information about the site. It is zoned high-density residential now, and this is a zoning map. It shows the listing of types of things that could be there, but we are on the list here for residential housing, and that's the list out of the zoning ordinance for your review and reference. This is just a listing of current landowners, the current landowner of the site, as well as the adjacent neighbors. Now this one probably doesn't mean much to you. But it's a topographic map of the area to let me know the lay of the land, so to speak. It's probably a 60-foot vertical elevation difference on the entire site, from front to back. And we will use that in more detailed designs as we go along. Thank you, Ben.
You're welcome.
And here we are to where we wanted to get to know what we propose. This is a site plan for the uses that we have come up with as being probable at this time. You can see a lot of the white area contained within the green outlined area is vacant because we don't know what may go there, as we need to figure that out as we go along, different types of uses. The site has about 15 single-family homes on it right now, and then it has one multifamily building up next to the GMC dealership. The rest of it is just open land bays for future use and development as time goes on. The blue area right in the middle is an existing pond that I think was just there, and it needs to be refurbished and made a little bit bigger, mainly as an amenity, but maybe more importantly, as a stormwater management tool, because when you develop land, you can't just let the runoff run off. You have to capture it, process it for water quality and water quantity so as not to impact downstream properties. And then the next sheet is just some construction details, mainly related to the road design, curb and gutter, drainage, intersection issues, as well as a picture of the trail that runs through us, the average trail. That's a pretty good example of what it looks like. It's just a gravel trail there now. But if you go back to our master plan, we show connecting our interior site to that trail for pedestrian access and recreation. Then the last thing is a little more detailed design, or rather a survey for the Lane Street road frontage, just for informational purposes, for us to know how to connect to that area, as well as some drainage culverts that are under the average trail. So this data that we have gives a good representation of what we propose, as well as the physical features of the site to know how to design it as we move forward. So quickly, that's all I have to share at this moment. Unless you have any questions, or maybe when you take pen to paper on the side there, something else can come up for us to talk about.
Thank you. Okay, now this reached the input part of the meeting.